This couldn't be happening. Therefore it wasn't. He explained that to the men at work around him. He could see them laughing. It took a moment before he realized he couldn't hear them. He could see them talking to each other. Their lips were moving. He tried tapping his ears to alert them to the problem, but for some reason he couldn't move his hands. He searched his mind for his last memory. The Dalma, of course. Had there been something in the Dalma? In the grain, perhaps? Was it making him hallucinate? He had heard of the disease that sometimes attacked old grain, but no. He had bought that same snack from Galeen every afternoon since his father had introduced them on the way to his first day at work. Her cart served only the finest food, made from the freshest ingredients. The world around him rocked, and him with it. He puzzled over this for a moment. Was it an earthquake? He blinked around and saw a bright light sweep across a glimmering sea. Why, he was on a boat. How had that happened? He was jolted out of his thoughts when they raised his feet and placed them in an amphora. It was a very large amphora, the size used to ship olive oil, only with a much larger mouth. The lip on the mouth came all the way up to his knees. It was empty but for his feet. His legs were bound at ankles and knees. How very odd, not to mention unbefitting one of his rank and family connections. He tried to tell the men this too, but they only laughed, again, and he couldn't hear them, again. He shook his head, trying to clear his ears, and this time they did clear, at least partially, although it made his head hurt worse, which was when he realized his head did hurt. He blinked again and found that he was sitting on a thwart in the open hold of the boat. A large boat, he thought, looking up at the full-bellied sail over his head. The light he had seen swept over the sail and disappeared again. It must be the light of Pharos. The heavy swell that made the hull rise and fall confirmed that they were on the open sea. It wasn't an earthquake after all, and the swell indicated that they were outside the lee of the island the lighthouse stood on. He'd had no plan to make a sea voyage, had he? No, certainly not. His work required good, solid land beneath his feet. "Why?" he said. The men laughed again. This time he heard them. It was not a pleasant sound. He knew none of them. One, who looked like a soldier in civilian clothes. You could always tell a veteran by their erect posture, a byproduct of marching in Roman legions for 20 years. This man slapped him on the shoulder and said, not without sympathy, "You noticed what you shouldn't have, boy, and worse, you talked about it. There is no forgiveness for that, and no pardon." This made no sense to him either. They were mixing a concoction in a large bowl from some white powder they tipped from a canvas bag, and cups of water from a leather bucket. A little powder, a little water, some vigorous stirring with a wooden stick. Repeat. When they were done, they poured it over his feet, filling the amphora halfway up his calves. He stared down at it, bewildered, wriggling his toes. It felt very grainy. Standing over him, the men argued if it was enough. "Arquetta," the soldier said with finality, "that stuff is worth our weight in silver. The boss won't be happy if we waste it." He nodded at the pot, "And rinse that out before it hardens." He understood, finally, and his mouth opened wide in a soundless scream. He was still screaming when he went over the side, the weight of the amphora and its contents dragging him down. The water closed over his head. He tried to take a breath and choked as the water rushed in and the air bubbled out of his nose and mouth and lungs. He tried to cough, tried to twist his hands free of their bindings, tried to pull his feet free of the amphora. It was just before dawn. The last thing he saw was the golden light of Ra rising up over the eastern horizon as he descended into the ever-darkening depths of the Middle Sea.